This is volcano surfing, and this is something that I never thought that I would be doing, but when in Rome or Nicaragua, do as the Nicaraguans do.
Hey everyone,
I'm Tim, and I've just finished a 9-month odyssey around Latin America. Now I'm reopening my diaries, and this time I'm bringing you along with me. Week by week, country by country, all the colors, all the craziness, all the food, all the music, and all the splendor. 9 months when each morning was a new adventure. The road was my companion, and Latin America cast its spell on me. This is my Latin America Diaries.
Welcome back to Latin America Diaries. From Managua, Nicaragua's rather odd capital city, I boarded a bus bound for León, the second largest city in the country. Like many second largest cities of countries, it is considered Nicaragua's cultural capital. And about 2 hours later, I arrived in León and immediately detected a different atmosphere. Because if Granada had been a bit disappointing and Managua had been fascinating but not exactly enjoyable, León was where Nicaragua finally clicked for me. León is a beautiful colonial city filled with churches, colorful buildings, public squares, street art, and student life. It's also one of the cities most closely associated with Nicaragua's revolutionary history. During the struggle against the Somoza dictatorship, León was a major center of opposition activity and became one of the strongholds of the Sandinista movement. As a result, revolutionary imagery is everywhere. Murals cover the walls, Sandino's distinctive silhouette and broad-brimmed hat appear throughout the city. Historic buildings connected to the revolution sit alongside cafes, markets, and everyday street life. But unlike Managua, where the politics felt heavy and ever-present, in León it felt vibrant. It felt alive. The city has a real street culture to it, and it's surrounded by some of Nicaragua's most spectacular volcanoes. And trust me, one of those volcanoes is about to become very important. When I arrived, I checked into the very pleasant Poco a Poco Junior Hostel, dropped off my bags and settled in. I spent the afternoon wandering around the city center, and the next day I headed out directly to León's Museum of the Revolution, which is housed in the former headquarters of the Somoza-era National Guard. Today, the museum is run by former Sandinista revolutionaries who tell the story of the revolution from their perspective. Whether you agree with their politics or not, it's a fascinating place to visit because you're actually hearing the history from the people who actually lived it. As we made our way through the museum, we were guided by former members of the revolutionary forces themselves. They walked us through photographs from Nicaragua's civil war, explained the events that shaped the revolution, and showed us some of the weapons and equipment used during the conflict. It was also fascinating because it was impossible not to sort of try and reconcile the contrast. I mean, here we were being shown images of the civil war and images of the violent revolution by the people who were involved in it, former revolutionaries. Yet they were so calm and generous and kind. It was sort of very difficult to reconcile, I guess, my experience there with the image that I think a lot of people might hold about communist revolutionaries in a place like Nicaragua. The tour eventually led up to the rooftop, which offered spectacular views across the colonial city of León. Looking out over the cathedral domes, colorful rooftops, and surrounding volcanoes, it was easy to see why León is considered Nicaragua's cultural heartland. It was a fascinating insight not only into the country's history, but also into how that history is remembered and understood by the people who experienced it. That afternoon, I picked up a simple casa de horno because it was time to celebrate the Nicaraguan edition of my 40th birthday. It was nothing extravagant, a sweet cornbread cake native to Nicaragua, which I enjoyed back at the hostel, but it felt like an appropriate way to mark the occasion. Also back at the hostel, I met a gentleman who was helping disadvantaged children around Nicaragua. On the surface, that sounds like a very admirable thing to do, but there was something about the conversation, I can't quite put my finger on it, that left me feeling a little uneasy. It was nothing overt, but it was just a sense that I got inside. And to this day, it still disturbs me a little bit when I think back to the feeling that I had while I was speaking with him. It presented me with a real moral dilemma because, I mean, was I being overly cynical and critical of someone who just wanted to help people who were less fortunate than he was? Or was my instinct really telling me to do something or to say something? I'm not sure, really, but because I didn't have any firm evidence and it wasn't overt, I decided not to say something because what was I going to say, just that I had a bad feeling about it? I'm still not sure if I did the right thing in that moment. And that night also marked the unwelcome return of my cough. I had had a chest infection when I was in Cuenca in Ecuador, but this was about 6 weeks later. However, I do think that somehow I can trace it back to that, because I still feel like I never fully recovered from the chest thing. I'm still not sure, and really, who knows? So that night I went out to a local supermarket to buy some cough syrup, and I slept soundly. Unfortunately, that wasn't the end of that story. That saga actually ended several weeks later in yet another country. To find out how that story ended, please consider subscribing to my channel. That way you won't miss a beat while I'm traveling around Central America. If you like what you're seeing, please consider giving this video a like and sharing it on your social media channels. And if you really like what you're seeing, please tell your family and friends about my YouTube channel. It really helps grow a bit of a community around the channel, and it helps me build my audience. The next morning was my penultimate morning in Nicaragua, and talk about saving the best to last, because it was time to go surfing. And when I say surfing, I don't mean normal surfing. No. In keeping with my long-standing appreciation of extreme sports such as extreme ironing, it was time to go volcano surfing. And if you've never heard of volcano surfing, then don't worry, because you're about to find out what it is. The day before, I had signed up with a company called Volcano Day, who would take us out to one of the volcanoes to go boarding. That morning, our adventure began in central León, where we were loaded into the back of a truck and driven out towards Cerro Negro Volcano. The journey itself felt like part of the experience. As we bounced our way through the countryside and into the national park, it quickly became apparent that the vegetation along the roadside hadn't been trimmed back in quite some time. In fact, the truck seemed to be performing that maintenance itself, sending leaves, twigs and branches flying through the open sides as we were rattled along. The guides had warned us about this and advised us not to look at the sides of the truck, lest an errant branch introduce itself directly into one of our eyeballs. Eventually, we arrived at the base of Cerro Negro. Cerro Negro is not one of the biggest volcanoes near León, but it is one of the youngest. It emerged in 1850, making it one of the youngest volcanoes in Central America. Despite its youth, it's surprisingly imposing. From a distance, it doesn't look particularly large, but once you're standing at the bottom looking up, you quickly realize that you've got a decent climb ahead of you. The first clue as to how we would be surfing down a volcano came when the truck was unloaded and a stack of yellow wooden boards appeared. These, as it turned out, were our sleds. We were each expected to carry our own board to the summit, although there was the option to pay someone else to carry it for you. I decided to save my money and carry mine myself. We began the ascent through low scrubland before emerging onto the volcano's black volcanic slopes. As we climbed higher, the landscape became increasingly dramatic. You could clearly see where the previous lava flows had carved their way through the countryside, leaving stark black scars across the landscape. The contrast between the dark volcanic rock and the lush green vegetation surrounding it was striking. Further up, we reached a viewpoint overlooking the crater itself. Cerro Negro is still considered an active volcano, although thankfully it wasn't erupting that day. From the rim, you could see steam and gases venting from within, a constant reminder that this mountain is very much alive. We continued around the crater rim towards the highest point of the volcano. From there, the views were extraordinary. Looking down into the crater on one side and across the flat volcanic landscape of Nicaragua on the other, it felt like standing on another planet. And honestly, this kind of extreme sport is really my kind of extreme sport. I'm not one for throwing myself out of a perfectly good aeroplane or dangling from a bungee cord, or really just falling from great heights as a form of entertainment. But walking around the rim of an active volcano, knowing that I was still relatively safe up there, enough danger to make a great story, but not with my stomach up in my mouth, that's my sweet spot. Standing up there on the summit of an active volcano, carrying a wooden sled and preparing to surf down the side of it, I couldn't stop smiling. This was the sort of experience you remember for years afterwards. I spent a moment up there on the summit with the group, just taking it all in. I pressed my hand down to the earth, and it was surprising just how hot the earth was, a reminder of just how alive our earth's crust actually is. But as they say, what goes up must come down, and we walked back around to the outer rim of the crater in the area just above where we had parked on the truck, and it was there that we were taken through a crash course in volcano surfing. It turns out that volcano surfing is slightly more technical than it looks. You need to know how to control your speed, how to steer, and most importantly, how to brake. We were also issued protective suits, Not because the activity itself is particularly dangerous, but because Cerro Negro is covered in loose volcanic ash and small rocks. By the time you reach the bottom, everything is black with dust. Before joining the tour, we were also advised to bring along a cloth or a mask of some sort, because once goggles are issued, you put them on and you're wearing the suit, the only part of your body that's still exposed is your nose and mouth, and inhaling volcanic ash is generally considered a poor life choice. Fully suited up, we followed the guides down to the launch point where it began to spit with rain. Now, you don't actually begin from the very edge of the rim because it's not steep enough up there. Instead, you have to walk down a little bit, probably about 50 meters, to a place where the volcanic ash forms a steeper incline. And standing up there for the first time, looking down at where I was about to be surfing, it was admittedly a little intimidating because you are very high up. And volcanic ash and rock is not slippery, so it needs to be pretty steep in order to actually gain the momentum for you to slide all the way down. So you really do feel like you're looking straight down the side of the mountain at that point. Thankfully, the guides had done a very good job at training us for volcano surfing, and they had told us that while we wouldn't be in complete control of the sled, we would have enough control to slow ourselves down if things got a bit out of hand. One thing that we were told though was not to stop completely, because if you stop yourself completely, then that's the end of it. From there, you'd be walking back down the side of the mountain with the sled in your hands. So I stood there and watched 1 and 2 people go, and then after that, it was my turn. I sat down on the board, I took 1 deep breath, I launched myself, and then it was on. I was hurtling down the side of an active volcano. The board rattled across the loose volcanic ashes, black dust sprayed up around me, the wind rushed past my face. I could feel the speed building beneath me, but I still had enough control to keep things exciting rather than terrifying. And by the time I reached the bottom, I was grinning from ear to ear.
That was insane. I can't believe we did it. Yeah, I know, seriously, I know. Yeah.
Without doubt, volcano surfing was one of the most memorable and amazing and exciting activities of my entire time in Latin America. And then we walked back over towards the car park, we piled back into the truck, which was where I accidentally managed to create one of the most awkward moments of the entire trip. So I was able to speak Spanish well enough while I was traveling. However, when I've learned second or third languages, one thing that I've found consistently difficult is understanding Spanish or Urdu spoken by the particularly elderly and the very young. Some people on the tour had opted for an option on the tour with food that paid a little bit extra for it. So I hadn't done that. But while we were standing there waiting to get back into the truck, fresh fruit like slices of watermelon were provided to the people who had paid extra. Because I hadn't paid the supplement, I walked to the back of the truck and got back into the truck waiting to be driven back towards the city of León. While I was waiting there, one of the kids, which was with his family in the group, he approached the back of the truck with his slice of watermelon and he held it out for me to take. I was sort of like, no thanks, I don't need it, and also I hadn't paid for it. But he sort of said something really quickly in Spanish and I didn't catch it, but it felt like he was insisting. So I grabbed the slice of watermelon from him and he sort of muttered something else, like gesturing towards me. So I was like, okay, fine. So I took like a small bite to be polite. As I took the bite of watermelon, he climbed up into the truck, and then as soon as he got up there, he grabbed it back out of my hands. And it was only then that I realized that he wasn't offering me a bite of the watermelon. He just wanted me to hold on to it so that he could use both hands to hoist himself up into the truck. Later, I tried to explain myself to his parents, and they seemed to laugh about it and understand, but probably I was the creepy older guy in someone else's story that day too, so maybe I shouldn't be passing judgment. Back in León that afternoon, I decided to finish my time in Nicaragua with a traditional Nicaraguan feast. Across the city, local vendors set up informal food stalls where you can mix and match different dishes to build your own meal. My plate ended up piled high with grilled meat, rice, beans, coleslaw, fried plantains, tortillas, and various other delicious things. It was exactly the kind of meal that we fill up on after a day spent surfing down a volcano, you know. That night, back at the hostel, I called it a very early night because the next morning I would be jumping in a bus onwards to my next destination. If you want to find out what that is, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe, and tune in again next time on Latin America Diaries.